So I call this meeting to order at 3:04 p.m. To begin, I'm just going to read the same statement I've been reading pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the North Reading School Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting are welcome, and if you want to type any questions or ask any questions to us, we are more than willing to hear that. So to begin, we'll just sort of take attendance. Well, we did that already. It sounds like we have Mrs. Imbriano, we have Mrs. Diana Boutwell, we have Mr. Chris Papavasilio, and myself, Scott Buckley here. Rich McGowan is running a little bit late, so when he joins, we will, for the record, say when he joins. So if anybody sees him join before me, just let me know so we can say for the record that he has joined. And we'll kind of begin. We are going to go a little bit out of order because Mr. McGowan would like to weigh in, and frankly, we have some votes on some things, and I'd rather have all five of us here to vote. So just begin today with public input. If there's any members of the public that would like to be heard on something that is not on the agenda, I will pause for a moment. I don't think we have anybody.
Mr. Buckley, you may want to suggest that everyone do *6 to mute their phones.
I was just going to suggest that because I can see some people with open mics.
So please mute yourself if you are not speaking. Student report, there's no student report. So for the new business, we're going to wait on the new business till Rich is here because he would like to hear the update on the coronavirus, and I do think it would be valuable to have all of us when we talk about the wage issue. So if it's okay with Dr. Daly and Mr. Connolly, I'd like to go right ahead to the budget workshop and turn it over to you guys to begin.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Can everyone hear me? This is Michael Connolly. Scott, you can hear me, right? Everyone?
Yes, you're coming through.
All right, great. So what you should be looking at now is sort of the agenda. We're jumping to level 3, to number 3. So I figured, as we typically do in the budget workshop, I was going to start to go through some of the highlights of the FY21 budget that was presented on March 2nd or March 9th, and that is reflected in the preliminary budget books that have been out for quite some time now. I'm going to kind of speak to it sort of at a high level. Please, if anyone has questions, jump in and let me know. I intend to go over the major budget drivers, what are the current budget gaps in terms of what the town revenue plan is, talk about major personnel and expense changes that are in the FY21 budget and any remaining unknowns or risks or assumptions. I am going to spend some time talking about enrollment and going through, there's enrollment data in the packet. And then at the end, I want to talk a little bit about plans and proposals to potentially close a budget gap. So I'm going to jump right into it on page 4 here because the first few pages are for the earlier conversation about the COVID-19. So as you recall, this is our budget. So the budget that we presented and that the administration is recommending is this middle column, the $33,199,530 budget, which is a 4.5% increase over FY20, a little over $1.4 million. As of Friday, which was the last finance planning team meeting that was held, that would result in an existing budget gap of a little over $585,000 based on the recommended budget that we had presented and that is reflected in the preliminary budget. As you know, we sort of been putting together 3 budgets, a level services budget, which is the first column, our recommended budget, which is a modified level services, as well as a full requested budget that would achieve just about everything in NRPS 2021, our strategic plan. So these are the budgets. The level services budget gap is a little over 324,000, just about a 1% difference between what we are calling level services and what the town revenue plan is reflected right now, as that would be calling for a 2.7% increase, and we are right now looking at either 3.7 for level services, 4.5 for our modified, and then our full requested is 6.6%. So if you look at some of the salary highlights, you can see that first and foremost, we need to meet our contractual obligations, whether that is reflected in all three budgets, the 734, 193, 2.3%. That does include an estimate for retirement and attrition savings based on known retirements and what we've been seeing. And then it also includes a salary pool. So we continue to negotiate with paraprofessionals. We've reached tentative agreements, as you know, with clerical and custodians. So the impact of those negotiations is reflected here. We haven't voted publicly on those, and we will do so in the near future. We still have some work to do with the paraprofessionals, but we think this amount is certainly an amount that would cover the conversations that we've had with these bargaining units. From a level services standpoint, is enrollment-driven increases, which I'll get into in a moment on page 2. There's also the need for some middle school teachers. I talked about this in the presentation. And then there's some additional positions, both guided by what was identified as high priority positions by the administrative team in NRPS 2021, as well as operationally. So, it's fair to say that the 200,000, and I'll get to what that is in a moment, is the amount that's above level services from a salary standpoint. When you look at our expenses, and I'm going to get to those positions more in a moment on page 2, but when you look at our expenses, not a lot of difference between what level services are and what the modified recommended budget is. The only difference there is in that first line item, technology needs. There's a need to increase about $17,000 to meet our needs of just students. Our network management software is going up. Software we need to support our wireless access points, to support our infrastructure, to support our information management systems. Some of those are coming off warranty, and we need to kind of move those into the budget. So that is having an impact of about $17,000. The additional $60,000 there is a plan to try to move the student device one-to-one plan into the operating budget. As you know, this current fiscal year represented the first full year that we reached our one-to-one plan to have students in grade 7 and grade 12 all have a Chromebook. There's going to be a need to provide Chromebooks to 7th graders and continue that one-to-one plan, the new 7th grades coming in and so forth, and make sure the devices are refreshed. And our model is based on the device lasting just about 5 years. So that is really part of our curriculum and our educational program. We feel like if we can achieve it financially, it would make sense to allocate those funds, which is about a $60,000 cost, which would include the cost for the Chromebooks and the licensing and so forth, in our operating budget, as opposed to relying year after year on a continuation of funding through the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. So that is really the difference between those two lines and what's modified and what's level.
Michael, quick question.
Yeah, please.
Just on that one, so that's a $60,000 difference on the technology needs line from level to modified. But we also did request in the CIPC request. Do we have that request in there as well?
So we don't have the computers. We do is we have a $45,000 instructional equipment request, and what that is that's really the classroom instructional learning devices needs. Whether that be really it's an interactive board. Right now we have the module, the desktop module, the overhead projector, and the Minio board, the white smart board. We are looking to, in most cases, move towards kind of a one fits all with a interactive device that staff would be able to use their laptops or Chromebooks to HDMI connect or Chromecast connect to that device to kind of take 3 pieces of equipment and move it to 1. So that is what the capital improvement planning committee request is for next year. The $60,000 is not in the is not in our capital improvement planning committee request. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
What we are in a little bit of I'll talk about this a little bit later, but we are in a little bit of a good position right now in the sense that we did receive the earmark state grant funding this year, and we also received the capital improvement planning committee funding this year for $60,000, as well as the earmark technology grant through Representative Brad Jones, which we haven't spent. So we do have money should we not be able to fund that amount for next year. Should we come to that? And I'll get to that a little bit later on. There's certainly needs for professional development. We're certainly seeing a need to devote some funding there. That some of this is efforts through our SEAM collaborative and to work with some coaching and literacy and student support to allocate some funding there. We do consider that a level services request. Most of that is in the budget currently, and there's just line items that haven't been adequately funded for it that we've tried to find, so that is necessary. From an operational and a fixed cost standpoint, we see the wastewater treatment plant rates go up each year. Snow removal effort costs are always valuable and difficult to predict, but there's some needs there. And then the HVAC and the electric and other operational needs are there. And then some of the fixed cost increases, certainly legal tends to go up every year. Our busing rate in our final year next year is going up. Our security software is going up. Other technology and different software for our attendance systems, our professional growth systems, our student support systems is going up annually, and then funding for audits and so forth is necessary there as well. So special education, we have seen an uptick in the special education contracted services line to support medical therapeutic services to students, mainly ABA services, applied behavioral services to students on the autism spectrum. This has really been an underfunded line for a number of years that we've looked to kind of manage as we've gotten into the fiscal year. I'm trying to move it and fund it at an adequate level, and it would need about $60,000 to do that. And then where there is savings is in the out-of-district tuitions and transportations area, based on an assumption at the moment that there's going to be less students in those out-of-district placements. As I have always and often said, and as we all understand, that is the biggest variable and the biggest risk of a budget, because that can change overnight. And certainly with the school closure and the COVID and the virus and the COVID-19, it remains to be seen whether that may have an impact on some of our assumptions and our numbers for next year. But anything is possible. The last line item there is we do anticipate some additional revenue in circuit breaker, mainly that we're receiving this year that we'll use next year, which is what we are allowed to do. So that number is increased. So all that's netting to a very minimal expense budget increase, $43,000 for level, a little over $103,000 for our modified. So that's really how we're getting to the $1.4 million increase of about 4.5%. So I think folks have seen these tables before.
Michael, excuse me. Could I please ask whoever's calling in with the last number 37 to please mute your phone? You can do *6. We're hearing a lot of feedback. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So table 1 is what we're considering level services. This is reflected in both level services and in our modified. The elementary level, we can get to this area in a moment when we get to the elementary enrollment information. But this is really a net impact of the changes. What we're really seeing is the full day kindergarten enrollment going down somewhat because it was very high enrollment, both in half and full day kindergarten this year. And then we're seeing grade 1 go up next year significantly as that higher kindergarten class moves up. And there's some smaller grade 5 classes sort of moving on to the middle school and some higher grade 4 classes moving in. So there's a little bit of a less kindergarten positions needed, but more grade 1 and in some cases more grade 5, all netting to a 1.5 FTE impact to just maintain the class sizes that we've been able to maintain, particularly in the primary grades, ensure there's consistency and equity across the 3 elementary schools. And then on the middle school level, I think we're well versed in what we're trying to achieve here between the last 2 years, this year and next year. What we see this request as being really a continuation between FY20 and FY21 with funding these 2 academic teachers at the middle school to help broaden both foreign language, broaden STEM. It began this year. We need that to continue next year to provide the foreign language programs that are available now to both grades 6, 7, and 8. This plan allows access to French and Spanish at a much earlier grade level and allows 8th grade students to see Spanish 2 and French 2 in the 8th grade. And allows access to the science, technology, engineering, mathematics curricular areas as well. So if this were not to be funded, it would impact the level of services we're experiencing today. So we do view that as a level of services, even though it's directly tied to our teaching and learning strategy and our strategic plan. Table 2, as a reminder, so these are things above and beyond level services. They are identified as the higher priority positions by the administrative team. I spoke of these 3 positions at the presentation. Certainly the elementary teaching and learning coordinator has been in the plan, has been part of this list in the past, has not made the cut as we've moved through the budget process, as well as the reading specialists. Both these have been in the budget at this stage in previous years and not made the final cut. They remain priorities. Certainly when we look at the elementary level, having access to an additional coordinator and curriculum leader to align curriculum, provide consistent professional development across all 3 schools, provide the supervision and evaluation support and oversight to the school principals is certainly extremely valuable. And we see this as a first step in moving towards the curriculum leadership model that we've certainly envisioned and we're trying to achieve. The reading specialist certainly allows all 3 elementary schools to have additional reading support, allow us to intervene earlier and apply response to intervention strategies at a much earlier level to be proactive when students are struggling in this area, to provide those necessary academic supports to both all students, really, both special education and regular education students when they need it. And this would be spread across all 3 of the elementary schools. The final one there is an operational need. We've talked about this one in the past. I think it's that salary is being partially offset by the assumption that we're going to save in overtime. I think we will save in overtime. Right now, we don't always have a full complement of staff with the custodians, which is not unusual. This would allow us to move a custodian around to not allow any building kind of fall behind their cleaning needs, and allow us to adequately clean the areas that need to be cleaned on a day in and day out basis. And it would also prevent us from having to grab from second shift personnel into first shift when there is a sick call, or for instance, and not incur an overtime costs. So there's some savings there, and there's some operational benefit and efficiency gained by having an additional body in the custodian unit. So those are the 6.5 FTE positions that we recommended. Table 3 and Table 4 are all positions that we've identified that are of need and in our strategic plan.
Michael,
Yes, please.
may I quickly just jump in? So, one question on the elementary teaching and learning coordinator position, the
Yep.
now 108, 109. Is that all salary for that position? Is that also benefits or?
No, so there are no benefits in any of these numbers. So these are all the salary amounts. So
Okay.
the elementary teaching and learning coordinator would be part of like the administrative contract. So this is sort of like a mid-level administrative contract area salary.
Okay, thank you.
So tables 3 and tables 4 are the additional positions that, money not being a factor, we would love to have all of these. Obviously, it's unrealistic to add an additional 11.5 or 6.5 FTE positions, particularly in what we're dealing with in the uncertainty of the economy and so forth. But they're all areas of need, and when we redo our strategic plan, when we look to the future, we'll certainly be looking at what was achieved through this budget cycle and what was not, and relook at things again. But these are conversations the administrative team has on a weekly basis, and these positions remain positions that we still feel are needed. Certainly, the curriculum leadership model, as you can see, is highlighted there. Those secondary to bring the secondary level in line with the elementary level with the teaching and learning coordinator is necessary in these areas to not only certainly provide the professional development, align curriculum, give the support to the curriculum leaders and the folks in the teachers, but provide that other layer of administrative support to as well from the curriculum standpoint is needed. And then we certainly all know and can recognize the importance of school adjustment counselors and providing those student support systems that are there as well. But the administrative team sort of landed on tables 1 and 2, recognizing what has been the top budget priorities and goals of the district and the committee to protect class sizes, to protect the core curricular areas, move STEM forward, move foreign language forward, work to provide the curriculum leadership that we're striving for in the academic support systems, and then being able to maintain our buildings appropriately is where we landed on recommending tables 1 and 2 to the committee. Before I move on and get into other areas, is there any questions? Those are kind of my high-level comments about the budget. Any questions at this stage? Okay. So this just talks about some of the expenses, which I've already seen. You can, if that document is there for your looking, this just more breaks down in higher level detail what I went over on page 1 in terms of some of the software and technology needs that are going up and building costs that are going up, special education, fixed costs. I should say fixed costs needs in table 3 in the title there, and then table 4 is special education. So I kind of went through that already. I feel like this gives an extra layer of detail in allocating the numbers. I'm going to if you go quickly back to the agenda here. So I kind of covered A, B, and C, and certainly when we look at number 4 and even part C, every budget has a level of risk and unknowns. And I think with what we're dealing with in the current environment of COVID-19 and the long-term impact that may have not only locally, but certainly on the federal and state budget, really is a big unknown right now and an uncertainty. So we'll have to really monitor the situation and stay on top of any changes there. I know there was a stimulus package that is being released. We don't really know what that's going to mean for North Reading, and it's going to take some time for that federal package to be disseminated on through the DESE and the state process and through their formula, and how that will flow down to the various LEAs and school districts. But we'll certainly pay attention to that very closely. So, I think in echoing the finance planning team's comments on Friday, I think they just really want to take as a conservative approach as possible when in light of what we're dealing with. and the uncertainty that this has presented. And we certainly can appreciate that as we move forward. Special education circuit breaker funding and the Student Opportunities Act. I don't think this will impact that. But there's some good avenues being made on that front with the Student Opportunities Act. We may not be benefiting greatly in the area of Chapter 70 state aid, but I think over time, over the next 3 or 4 years, them adding transportation to that formula, as well as removing that formula from being tied to the foundation budget, which should, for statewide, will increase greatly over the next 7 years as the Student Opportunities Act gets phased in. I think will all benefit all communities, in North Reading should see some level of benefit there as well. To echo that, we're not really banking on any of that for FY21. Operating out of caution, we're not sure the final impact of adding transportation to that formula will be. So, we're still projecting an increase to our offset, mainly because of the revenue that's coming in this year and our ability to be able to use this year's money next year and get into that process. So, but it's something to certainly be aware of. And then the other item that remains somewhat of an unknown, or just certainly presents additional challenges, is the COVID-19 and the school closures and the break or disruption in particular services, particular optional programs, the athletic programs, the busing programs, certainly full-day kindergarten and preschool. These are all items that we take revenue in, that we build assumptions on, and look at our reserves and look at our carryover amounts and count on those to keep a funding level as consistent as possible when we build the subsequent year budget for FY21. So there is a level of uncertainty and a level of just unknown right now as we look at the environment that we're in the school closure. So it's something we're going to have to be mindful of, as we move forward. I'm certainly not here in panicking or thinking that we're suddenly in. I just think it's something to be mindful of, and it's something we're going to have to monitor moving forward. So those are kind of my comments. What big picture comments about
Real quick, Rich
state
came
budget?
in.
Yeah, Michael, just want to record state that Rich McGowan has joined us, so he's here as well now.
Oh, excellent. So I feel like I've covered 3 and 4. Those are my kind of opening comments to guide our discussion. I'm happy to move on and go to number 5 and talk about enrollment. I'm happy to take questions at this point. If now that Mr. McGowan has joined us, if we want to go back to earlier parts of the agenda and then return to the enrollment discussion, I'm willing to do what the committee wants from this point.
So let's begin with, I have a couple of questions, and then I don't know if other people do as well, but and maybe if people want to just in the chat, if you guys have specific questions, just kind of let me know. The first time I just have a quick comment from the finance planning team. So usually at this point in time, we're trying to shore up what those revenue numbers are. And a lot of times there are certain things that we're looking at. For example, last year when there was a little bit of additional money at the end, there was money that came from new growth because how they were, what they're expecting for new growth. They were being a little conservative, or we were being a little conservative, and then, kind of put that up a little bit. Health insurance, typically it starts assuming a 7.5% rate. And last year, the number came in under that, so we were able to put it down to 4.5%. I think there was interest income that was taken out that got put back in. So there were some changes at the end. I'll just say from the finance planning team meeting the other day, I don't think there's going to be much, if anything. There's a lot of concern about if the numbers, even being conservative, if that's enough, because the health insurance right now is at 7.5%, and so we obviously can't budget under what the actual cost is. If that were to go down, that would be great. I know there's still ongoing discussions, but I don't think there'll be much movement there. I don't think they're going to anticipate much more new growth, and there's worries about some of the revenues that are there already. There's worries about meal tax, which isn't a huge amount, but it's an amount. Worries about meal tax. There's worries about permits. There's even worries about collecting on real estate taxes, things like that going forward, because we don't know what the oncoming or the upcoming recession potentially might do to it. So I think there's a lot of concern about it, and so I think that's really why I know that I am thinking of this as kind of the number we need to try to get to. I'd love for it to be a little bit better than that. I know that the town side has a much bigger deficit, the municipal side has a much bigger deficit than we do. And I think that they are very much saying from the town side, they're really looking at it from a no new hires perspective. And I think that's kind of what the marching orders for the town are going to be. So that's kind of like the comments from finance planning. And then my only other comment would be, I think it would be good to go back before we start talking about the budget. I would like to go back to the top of the agenda because I think we really need to have a discussion about, like you were saying, Michael, about whether or not our budget right now is going to take an impact, because what we can prepay for special education relates to how our budget does this year, and that can impact next year's budget as well. And if we do have, like, for example, the food service, that was going to have a profit of $10,000, we were saying, and now if we're going to be losing money in that area, I think we really need to understand the impact on this year's budget and talk about things like wages and stuff like that before we can really start planning for 2021. But I don't know if other people have different thoughts on that.
I would agree with you, Scott, that I think we need to know kind of like what the revenue is looking like this year. Is there any savings from not having kids in school with, maybe the electric and heating and whatnot, things of that nature. So I would be in favor of going back to number one.
Great. Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Any other thoughts? Diana says same here. Okay, hearing none. Why don't we go back to the beginning of the agenda, and I'll ask Dr. Daly first to begin with an update on COVID-19.
Thanks, everyone. So we are at a point right now where we are closed through May 4th, and we are having many different discussions. Today's been quite a busy day on the superintendent's listserv. A lot of conversation about April vacation, so I'd love to get some insight and input from folks here. There's certainly two different camps and two different schools of thought. One is that we're under a lot of pressure. We need a break. This is already a scheduled break that we've had in our calendar since we voted them in, and so it's the plan is to begin remote learning on Monday, April 6th, and we'd have 2 weeks of that, and then we would take the Patriots Day and then the rest of the week as a break, and then resume after that, and maybe do 2 additional weeks until May 4th. Another way to look at it is, we've already lost some time, and people are working very hard, but there's a lot of concern about, where we're going to get to by the end of the year, and do we want to take that time away or not? And there's definitely arguments on both sides. There's a lot of implications, as in our contracts about, our paraprofessionals, for example, get paid quote-unquote vacation days during those days. So there's quite a lot to consider when we talk about contracts and those pieces. So that's one piece that's been talked about. The biggest focus that's been on all of our administrative team and our teachers. We've worked very, very closely with our NREA Teachers Association and our administrators to develop a remote learning plan. And so the goal is to have that plan ready to go on Thursday, so that's shared out tomorrow, so parents can get prepared for what to expect on Monday. And that'll start on Monday morning. It's going to look a little bit different at each level, and so the specific schedules will come out. One will come out from high school, one will come out from middle school, one will come out from elementary school. I think what's important, and what I'm going to make sure that is clear in what I send out, is that we are not trying to replicate a school day. This is not going to be for a full day or a half day, students logging onto a computer and receiving synchronous classes online. For any number of reasons, that is not what we're recommending. That is not what the state's recommending. What we are going to do is to provide a lot more structure, and some of those opportunities will be online, some of them will be computer-based, but many of them will not be. Many of them will be independent reading activities, experiments, doing work at home. What will be different, though, is there will be times to check in with teachers for accountability, to get feedback, to get advice and support from their teachers. We also will have all of our specialized instruction providers, our support staff, counselors, special education teachers, related service providers, providing whatever possible supports they can do virtually and also through phone. And so we have all kinds of layers of support in place for that as well that will be ready to roll out on Monday. So that's really the plan. That's the big picture of what's happening. And there's a lot of smaller things that are going on that we have a lot of questions that we've been working on that I'd like to talk about as well. But I don't know if anyone has questions about the big picture of this.
Maybe we'll go around quickly. Janine, any questions or comments?
Sorry, I sneaked out for a second. I guess the top of my question was the April vacation, where there's kind of like travel guidelines and stuff. Even though they may have booked a vacation, chances are they'll probably be at home. Is it an opportunity that the teachers are willing to teach through the April vacation, and is there a need for it? If the past couple of weeks have been non-school days, are we liable for making up for them again?
I'm not exactly sure about liable for making up. I think the question that's being presented that the commissioner is going to weigh in on is whether, if we do hold those days, can those days count towards the 185? And so that's part of the question that's being considered. So I think, I'm not sure if that answers your question, Janine, but that's still being investigated about how those would count. From what I've seen, there's definitely a clear split among districts about what they're doing it. In conversations I've had with the union, we certainly have not reached any decision on this, but we have discussed that we would wait and see and have some more information on this. Another reason why we might not want to rush into this is if something comes out from the state that extends the closure beyond May 4th, that also may change when and if we want to take a break from all this online learning, right? I mean, let's say we're doing this through June 30th, maybe the second week is not the week to take that break, right? We might want to reserve when we hold that break, so that even if there is a break, we might want to think about when it is. So I think there's a lot of variables still out there to consider. That's my opinion at this time. I hate to say to wait. I agree. I don't think a lot of people are going to go on a planned vacation. Another slight concern, I think people are very well aware of the stay-in-place orders, but I think we're going to switch to something with some structure in place. And if you go away from that, is there a concern that folks might see this as unstructured time and start thinking about doing some of these recreational activities that we know is not best that they're doing? Especially from everything we read, this is going to be possibly our peak time when we should be practicing our safe practices the most during that period of time. So certainly a lot to consider.
So one quick follow-up on that one, Dr. Daly. I know before you had said the state made clear that any days missed after a certain point in time did not have to be made up. When you're talking about the 185 days, we're not talking about if we didn't have April break, we would close earlier, are we? Or are we talking about not extending maybe? Or, I mean, if we don't have to make up the days, I think we already had like June 24th or whatever was the last day, or June 25th was the last day. Would the April vacation decision have any impact on when the last day of school was?
So I'm not necessarily suggesting that, but I believe that is what's being suggested and being discussed a little bit, because I think some districts are considering that if they take 4 days that were non-school days and now they're going to be there, could they get out 4 days earlier than their previously proposed 185th day? I'm not saying that would be everywhere, and I'm not saying that all of this would need to be bargained with our different associations, and we'd have to discuss that. But I think, I can speak for my conversations with all of our associations. Everyone wants to be committed to taking appropriate breaks. They're concerned about student, family, and their own employees, and so am I, mental health and social emotional health. But I think we're also all concerned with making sure that students have a sufficient amount of time on learning so that they make significant progress for the year. So these are all being considered. But it's my understanding that some districts are suggesting that they asked the commissioner to weigh in on whether a district that went back, I believe the Patriots' Day holiday would still remain, so that would be a non-negotiable day off on Monday. But if you went to school the other 4 days, could you be relieved of 4 of the days towards the 185? So that's what's being discussed, I believe.
Thank you. Well, my only comment on that one, as for my opinion, would be it would vary quite a bit on what happens beyond May 4th. And I don't know that we'll have clarity before April vacation, unfortunately. But because if you were to tell me we could have 5, if we were going back to school on May 4th or even May 15th or whatever, and we could get an extra few days in the classroom with people, I'd prefer that over an extra few days of digital learning or structured digital learning. But again, if it ends up being everything's going to be from home the rest of the year, I guess it doesn't really matter. So I don't know that there's any, if we'll have that information by then, but that's my thoughts. Rich?
Yeah, I agree with that part of it. If we do get back in the classroom, in my opinion, we should be going till June 30th, assuming they don't say we should go longer. I mean, we should go to June 30th, right? We should get as many days in the classroom as we can. If we don't get back in the classroom, then it's a little squishier in terms of, how many days do we need to continue the digital learning. The other thing to keep in mind is we don't necessarily have to take week-long breaks. It may be, and people may prefer this, parents may prefer this, if instead of taking a full April week, a week in April, that we take the holiday and then another day, an extra day, and then take another couple days, later on. So we don't necessarily have to be beholden to a full week off, I think, unless there's other considerations I'm not thinking about.
I would just say I agree, Rich. Just to be clear, about the June 30th, we would have to bargain anything beyond June 24th. And I'm not saying that we couldn't find some wiggle room there, but contractually that would then be at the max. That 185th day would be everybody's 181st day of work or 180th day of work. So we'd have to think about what that looks like for different groups. And I think some of that might be in, as we're negotiating now, because the contractual hours in the day are a little bit different, but also the delivery method's completely different and the working conditions are completely different. So as we're bargaining it, but I think that's something that I've spoken to with others is, I just want to keep all those things on the table because, I think we all want to do what's best to get our kids where we need them to be by the end of the year. But I just want to point that anything beyond the 185, we would at least have to have some real discussions about what that looks like. And I also agree that, approaching those 4 days a little differently, might be very helpful to us at some point as well. So something to be discussed further. And again, because I don't think this year it's going to particularly impact people's vacation travel plans the same way. I think we have to make the decision soon, but I think we have a little bit more time. We're hopefully getting some clarification from the commissioner this week on this issue. But my understanding is the commissioner is not going to issue a decree that this is what must happen. So.
Thank you. Diane, any comments on this?
Yes. You can hear me, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I was hoping that you could clarify starting next week, which will help make this all much clearer for me maybe, but whether or not we are transitioning to actual school days and required classroom learning. It's been optional to date. They've been classified as non-school days. Is that changing?
Right. So I'm still awaiting word on that idea of a non-school day, and what that means. From a human resources perspective, I would say that we really haven't been operating that the work and the things are optional. It's enrichment. I would say that what we've been putting forward was expected for students to engage with, and that those days up to this point have been days where students can engage. On Monday, what will be different is they will, and again, this is going to be very clear to people. Flexibility is key, and no one will be penalized for not engaging, especially given the circumstances that we understand that somebody may be unable to for any number of reasons, including being ill or dealing with an ill family member. But the general expectation will be that students are engaging with whatever content is put forward, and these are school days, certainly from Monday, April 6th on. And the expectation will be that they are engaging with the content and following the schedules that the schools put out. Again, plenty of room for flexibility for everyone within that, but I think what we've decided is having a structure that's in place, and you'll see there's more of a structure for middle and high school. Elementary is a little bit more flexible for a number of reasons. So there definitely will be much more structure and accountability with the plans moving forward. The actual terminology of whether it's a school day or non-school day has implications for us on, if we're thinking of them as if they were a snow day that doesn't have to be made up, that's different than as it's a school day. As far as people that are taking leaves of absence, for example, is one implication of that. And we are still awaiting clarification on that.
Okay.
Diane,
And yes, I mean, I appreciate that. I was having a hard time wrapping my head around going on April vacation, just for a variety of reasons, but I appreciate the alternative perspective. I had, Scott, you asked the same exact question I was going to ask, which was about the end of the year, and if we didn't go on April vacation, would it pull that date in? And, I realize that that's not fully vetted yet. I guess I understand, and maybe I'm a little bit biased from a parental perspective as well, but, this entire situation has taken a toll on children, I feel, across the board. And I know we're thinking about, getting in as many, in-house school days as humanly possible is a benefit for them to make sure that they're where they need to be from an education standpoint. I also think about morale and extending the school year. They still have expectations on them. And I think that, we need to think about the whole child and not just where they're going to be. At the end of the day, the entire country most likely is going to be behind the curve because of all of this. So I guess I just bring up the wellness of the child as well to think about.
Yep, absolutely, Diane. That's a good point that a lot of districts are making as well, and I've seen that argument too, that it's, and that's one of the main messages I'm going to be putting out, and what I share with parents is that we're going to be okay, and that there's certainly this competition between, and people feeling like we're falling behind, or I heard New Hampshire's doing this, or this district's doing that, trying to say we're all in the same place, and most of what we hear and what we see on social media is not what's actually happening. Everybody, I talk to all the superintendents every day, and everybody's in the same position where they are trying to move forward. One thing that I wanted to make clear also on April 6th, we are not moving forward with new content and new standards. So it's a little bit of a to wrap your head around. There's but essentially, if you're thinking of it in terms of a textbook, which is not how we like to think about it typically, but we're not going from chapter 16 to chapter 17. We are going to go deeper with chapter 14, 15, 16. We're going to revisit those most important learning opportunities and standards and go deeper with them. In some cases, it may be a new reading assignment or a new book. So the material that students are looking at might be new, but what they're learning and the standards they're covering is going to be the same. So we're right now calling that phase one. And part of the thinking there is some districts don't have the capabilities to move forward. Other districts do, and so we're trying to keep in unison as much as possible. And we are also realizing that there's enough of a variable for our teachers and our students to adjust to this, what we're calling remote learning, that we don't want to move too quickly into anything that's also new content. Because there's just more opportunities for folks to fall behind. This is actually, in a lot of ways, a great opportunity to do things in education that we don't find enough time, which is to reteach and relearn and go deeper with more engagement and what we call deeper learning. So that's the opportunity that we're going to take there. And then we're going to revisit when or if we may move into phase two. And that's something that we are in discussions to. In phase two, would be everything that is in phase one, but might involve some new content and some new learning. So we're really trying to also shy away from what we're doing right now, which is a synchronous Zoom or a synchronous Google Hangout. We're going to do that a little bit for some social emotional checks. We may have some synchronous teaching this way, but most of what we're going to try to do with teachers is to pre-record a lesson and do what we think of as called a flipped classroom lesson. There's just so many, basically with any technology, the more variables, the more that can go wrong. So if you're trying to do a live lecture and 2 or 3 kids can't get on, or they get kicked out, or their sound drops off, or their internet's overloaded, or whatever, now they're behind and they're missing the instructions. So if they're getting a link to a video that's pre-recorded, at least that video can be stopped, paused, played back, all those pieces as well. So even if there is a lecture, we're suggesting doing some of those techniques. But like I mentioned earlier, there's also going to be some written lessons. We're not doing paper packets, but we would have ways of delivering PDFs. We've shared with teachers ways to do interactive, we'll call them worksheets or PDFs back and forth, so students can do work that way as well. So it's not just about online learning and online modules. It's about all different forms of engagement. So that's really what we're going to be doing in phase one. But it's going to be revisiting some of those standards that we've covered, and then phase two, which would start no sooner than after the second week of phase one. So this will all be coming out in much more detail in the next few days.
Thank you, Patrick. I have a bunch of questions, but I want to share the stage first. Chris, do you have any questions?
Yeah, Patrick, I've got 2 questions. Excuse me, Dr. Daly. One's probably really easy, and one's probably impossible. But the first one is, if we decide to contemplate being open for April vacation, is that a decision you make? Is that a decision we vote on? What's the mechanics of that?
It would be bargained, and it would also be voted by the school committee because it would be a change in this calendar. So okay. Yeah, it would be logistically, we would definitely want to be talking about it on Monday. Because right now there is April vacation scheduled for next week. So I think we would need to definitely make a decision on Monday about that. It's not posted as an agenda item, but I think we could put it under the, one of the other items that's on there.
My other question, like I said, I apologize if this is a pretty unfair question, but if we're contemplating having or adding 4 days of instruction that right now aren't in the calendar, in addition to all the other factors people have brought up, one of the key ones is how far behind do we feel we are, and therefore how can we measure how worthwhile it is to go through all those steps and on all the drawbacks of working through April vacation. And do we have any way of getting any sort of sense as to how far behind we are or we're trajecting based on this unpredictable change we've had?
Far behind in terms of where we would be if we had full school days, or compared to other districts?
Based on our goals of what standards to teach and expectations of proficiency for the kids.
Yeah, I think we haven't had a full day of school since March 12th. So I think we're a couple of weeks behind of that in terms of scope and sequence, progress forward, but I think everyone in the state and really in the world is in the same boat. So we're not really behind others. We're just sort of Obviously, if we were having 7 hours of school day every day, we'd be in a different place. So I think
I see us doing the absolute best that we can given an impossible situation.
Yeah.
I feel like as soon as we bring up the question of should we add, days to the calendar of working, there needs to be some argument about how we've lost. It introduces what I think that impossible calculation is. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree, and I don't think we're suggesting that we would be adding days. I think if anything, it's maybe half days or things to get because we haven't worked full days, so we'll be adding half days. But I also think what's being talked about, is that the right time to take the break, or do you keep that? You still have those breaks, but maybe we either do a full, or as I think Rich suggested, maybe a day or two. And use them in other places. Again, if we had a crystal ball and we knew what the rest of the year looked like, might help us better make that decision. But there's certainly an argument on the other side that I for one, and I know Michael and others, like we've been working straight through every weekend, every day. Like we administrators absolutely need a break. I know the teachers have been geared up and anxious too, and so a lot of the thinking is that we kind of need a break in 2 weeks from that. We'll get 2 weeks under our belt. We'll be good. We'll take a little breather and we'll move on. So there's certainly arguments to be made all around for this. So it's not something that I've a firm opinion on at this time, but it's getting close. And I would love a little bit more from the state, and then we can hopefully make a decision on Monday.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. And so I have a few comments and some questions, but I want to start with just, thanking you again, Dr. Daly and Michael and all the administrators for putting the plan together. I know parents are all over the place about what they're looking for. Some, a lot of people are trying to work from home, and it's a very tough situation. I also want to specifically thank union leaders and the teachers, because I know the next couple of weeks are going to be hard. That's not what anybody does, and teachers are used to showing up in the room and doing their presentation, and everything's there in front of them, and there's going to, even if we're not doing full days, even if we're only doing a few hours, I assure people that the time that's going to have to be put in by the teachers is going to be at least the same as they were doing before, if not more. And there's going to be so many off-hour questions and specific, unique situations, and it's going to be very challenging. I mean, my brother's a teacher, and I know he's going through that right now in New York, and I just want to thank all the teachers and the paras and everybody else for doing that. And thank the parents for their patience. I know that everybody wants, a resolution that that is impossible to get, but it's, again, I appreciate the flexibility that parents are providing as well. Now, specific questions for Dr. Daly. So I think you mentioned this already. You said mostly it's going to be, pre-recorded things. So there's not, when we talk about a schedule, like it seems like there will be the ability to have some flexibility in timing. So like if a parent has a meeting in the morning, they could help them with a lesson the kid with a lesson in the afternoon. Is that true? The timing can be a little bit flexible when it's delivered?
So I would say yes, and that certainly will be most true of the elementary level. I think at the middle and high school, there's a little bit more expectation that the students will be engaging at a certain time. But again, everything is flexible with this. We're going to have provisions, if there's anything synchronous, that there'll be at least 24 hours notice. So it'll say, hey, we're going to be doing an online experiment or an online demonstration or a social chat, whatever it is. There'll be 24 hours notice, so people will say, hey, if I'm ever going to be there at 9 to 10, this is the time to be there. That kind of thinking. So
perfect. Thank you. Next question is, and again, you touched on this briefly, but for special education, for if there are services being given, if somebody gets speech twice a week or has an aide that helps them in the classroom, I mean, is the goal to have as best as possible to have that delivered, and so so plans can be set up for those individuals?
Absolutely. So Cynthia Conant's been phenomenal with this. She's been at countless meetings, developed guidelines, shared them out with special education. She and I have sat on a couple of different calls, both with the legal side and the special education side. There are definitely some changes and updates to some of the guidance coming out of the federal government around this. And so basically, I think in these, unforeseen circumstances, that my understanding of it is we're switching from it has to be all or nothing to some is better than none, and so we're going to try to provide the same frequency, and the durations may not be the same. So if someone was receiving 30 minutes 5 times a week, it might be 10 minutes 5 times a week or something like that. But the 5 times a week or the frequency will be consistent. That's my understanding of what she said. So those services will be delivered. There's all kinds of consideration about how they're delivered, virtually, confidentiality. There's many different implications, and so we're going to be putting some guidance out for parents in general, and there's also things that will be shared specifically with special education parents about confidentiality. But all of this has been vetted by legal teams federally, nationally, locally as well, to make sure we're doing what's right for the students.
Okay, thank you. So next, what about homework, testing, grading? Is anything going to be graded? Are there going to be grades at the end of the semester? Do we know that yet? I mean, is there going to be any sort of expectation of homework that's being turned in? I mean, I know people will be working at worksheets, but are they being graded? Is there testing that's coming up? Just curious. I know you're going to have directions coming out, but just getting out in front question.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be specifically laid out by the schools. There's questions particularly at the secondary level about, what constitutes the end of the third quarter, the beginning of the fourth quarter, some of those pieces. A lot of that, and I know there's a lot of questions about it, a lot of anxiety around it, and some of those answers are, we have not determined this yet. This is to be determined. Again, there's a lot of variables here that we have to continuously watch to figure out. There will certainly be an assessment and feedback, whether they are, what that looks like. I know that some of the schools are going to be using their rubrics to provide that kind of feedback and assessment to students as well. So students will definitely have assignments. There will definitely be feedback on those assignments. There will be due dates and expectations. Again, complete flexibility and understanding. Students are not going to be penalized if things aren't turned in. But that said, the system will be that the expectation is that these are completed by the due dates. And I think that means that, the exception and not the rule, right? The students that can't do something on time. And I think for the most part, for 99% of what we're doing, that's going to work just fine. And, if someone can't do something, we're going to be following up as we normally would to see what the issue is. And if they need academic assistance, we'll provide it. If they need medical or other assistance, we'll provide that as well, or get them in touch with those that need it. So that's the plan. As far as tests and quizzes and grades, I don't believe that that's a part of our plan at this time, because we're going to be assessing in different ways. As far as homework goes, I think that's something that's being discussed. I believe that what we're going to see is that there will be defined periods each day, and there will not necessarily be additional work on top of that. I think there's enough to try to manage. We're all living hectic lives outside of these days, and I don't know about you folks, but I feel, I've learned very quickly that, 4 hours of virtual meetings is absolutely exhausting in a way that 4 hours of face-to-face is not. I think it's very taxing to be doing this in a different way, and to not be moving around and seeing actual people, and to be staring at a screen, just your eyesight alone. And again, our students are not going to be staring at screens all day, but that said, I think to then ask them to do additional homework on top of that is probably too much. So I would not expect to see additional work like that. But again, I'm allowing the schools, the curriculum leaders, and the teachers to work out some of those details. So much more will be coming on that tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Just a couple more things. So now that we will be in some sort of structured learning, any update on elementary conferences taking place, and what about things like IEP meetings that might have been scheduled towards the end of the year?
The meetings will be, there's all kinds of guidance around the IEP meetings, and those will be able to resume, I believe, as early as April 6th. So those meetings, there's different guidance for how those are being presented, and part of our plan works in the availability of teachers and counselors and other providers to be a part of those meetings starting next Monday.
Great. thank you. And I'll hold all my questions on like the parent questions about like what happens next, because I know nobody really knows anything yet. The only other thing that I would just like to say is, and one thing that I've seen a lot on the community connection page is the idea of equity. And I think most people understand that, you know, we have an obligation, but also we should be making sure that we're providing an education to all of our students. There are occasionally those people that say, you know, the heck with the students that need extra help, but I appreciate that the administration and the school district has, you know, firmly said that, you know, we need to provide an education for all students. And you know what, maybe that means that some people are slowed down a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it's good to make sure that we're educating all of our students and not leaving anybody behind. And I think the people that are most vulnerable are sometimes the ones that need extra help. And at the end of this, if that gap, you know, that gap probably will already be growing a little bit from the way that we're doing this. But I think the more we can do to make sure that that gap between, you know, the students that don't need any additional assistance and those that do, the more we can do to make sure that that gap does not increase, the better we're going to be in the long run. And so I appreciate that a lot of thought has been given into conditions of equity, because I think that's a really important thing that, you know, that as a district that we need to prioritize. So
Yep.
that's my final thoughts on this.
I agree. I would say it's our legal, but it's also more importantly our moral obligation to make sure all students are being serviced equitably, and so that has to come first. And you know, it's the Maslow. I mean, we're our first need was making sure kids are getting fed. I mean, you would, you know, Michael has done a phenomenal job with this, and Anna and our team, Anna's team that's there. You know, I was. You know, we don't have the highest level of poverty, but you would be surprised how quickly people started responding to those emails the second they went out, saying, you know, I'm concerned about, you know, where my next meal is coming from, and we have to get meals out there. And they're doing a phenomenal job taking care of that. We've distributed well over 100 Chromebooks to families in need, some that don't have a device and some that are just realizing the logistics of, you know, now that mom, dad, you know, older brother, everybody's working from home, we now need another device for the elementary or the middle school student that doesn't have a one-to-one. So we were able to distribute all those devices over the last couple of weeks, and there's still a few others coming in, but we have to take care of all those issues and get those first. We can't move forward with the remote learning plan and leave people in the dust because they just can't get online. So.
Yeah, and people forget that almost 20% of our students do receive some sort of services, and so it's not that it's 0.1% of people that are getting these services.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other final questions or comments from the committee?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to add on, Scott, that the other part of that is, you know, in terms of some parents' expectations is, I mean, the amount of work that Patrick, you guys have put in just to get to this point where you can start offering these sort of, you know, this next level of engagement starting on April 6th. You know, to expect that somehow we can magically start providing the entire curriculum online as if, you know, nothing had happened is you know, not very realistic, and I think most people do realize that, but there's definitely some people in the community who just don't understand why we can't just start doing tests online and doing everything like we normally do, but do it online. And you know, I certainly have a great appreciation for the amount of work you guys have put in, and see the difficulties. We probably all see it in our professional lives, how hard it is to sort of even maintain some basic level of connection with our clients and et cetera, and it's just tremendously hard. So
Yep.
I think that the expectations of I think, as I say, I think most of the community understands that along with the equity piece, and I think we're in good shape.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say too that, you know, our teachers are doing a tremendous job to learn. It's a learning curve just to learn some of these new tools, some of these new modalities, some of these new approaches, and just how to budget your time. A lot of our teachers are also working with their own children or parents or family members, and that there's a lot going on at home that they have to adapt to, and they've got Wi-Fi issues and things at their houses too. So I mean, there's a lot to be concerned with. But the parents have been very, very supportive. We've received feedback, we've received some questions and comments and concerns, but overall, parents have been very patient and very supportive. And I can't thank our community enough for all that they're doing. And I think we're doing a very thoughtful and careful plan, and we're going to be solid. And I think a lot of the, to compare us to other states, some states jumped into things and said they overpromised a little bit. And now they're having to scale back some of what they're realizing pretty quickly that was a bit of an overpromise. I think Massachusetts kind of went slowly with this. We are now ramping it up. But I think in many ways, at least having through May 4th outline for us is going to be nice. We're looking forward to Monday and this new normal, and having that for a few weeks, I think will be a welcome change, because I think trying to build this and trying to adjust to every day getting new information and how do we adjust, that's been the real challenge. And I think what will be good is once we get into this groove, get a few days under our belt, I think we'll get used to it, and then it's going to start to feel like, all right, this is what school is like, and we'll get used to it pretty quickly, and I think that'll work well.
Okay, thank you very much, and I really hope that you take a day or two off this weekend, Patrick and Michael and everybody else. Like, we need you for the long run, and so I really hope that you can find some time to to get away from it yourself and unplug.
Thank you. No, we will. We've been taking our walks too, so.
Okay, so I think we're going to move to the next section, section 2, just talking about payment of wages on this. I don't know if Patrick or Michael is going to start it, but if we can maybe talk a little bit about the budget impacts of things as well, about, what revenue's not coming in, deficits that we might have. I think that would help lead the discussion, and I think it might be that we have to have more than one motion here for the different types of employees and different types of wages we're talking about. But I don't know, Patrick or Michael, if you guys are leading us through this.
Yeah, Patty, do you want me to just talk a little bit about that question in terms of just, I guess, higher level financial overview and financial risk assessment that was done based on the information known?
I think that would be helpful. If I can just start, and maybe Michael, you can also speak to, we did get, since our last time meeting, we have had some input from legal experts and about contractual employees, and there's been some changes there. I will say, as superintendent, I defer to Michael on budget implications, and I want to hear that. But I think from a moral perspective, I think keeping our folks whole for full-time salary, and we can also talk about some other contractual benefits that we may want to consider. But I think regular salary, regular pay for folks, I would argue that is sort of our moral obligation through May 4th. These are our employees, and I think we need to look out for them. And we need them to be back and be healthy and well when we open school. That's my stance, but I do appreciate that there are some nuances, and I think Michael will explain some of those things to consider.
Great, thank you, Patrick. Patrick said it well, and I think we're on the same page overall. In the supplemental handout that went out to the committee, there was on the desktop of the commissioner guidance that I included, and the commissioner has been clear, echoing what Dr. Daly just commented, that he does feel that there is a moral, obligation to pay our employees salaried and hourly, during this closure period, and then let's put our heads together, and which I think Dr. Daly and our administrative team has done to allow them to work. It's not in your typical brick and mortar school building, school classroom, but there is work to be done and work that is happening. But from a financial standpoint, I have looked at some things, and it's a very challenging process because so much of this is fluid, and so much of it remains uncertain. What is the extent of the closure? We'll be able to resume on May 4th. What will happen with the athletic program? What will happen with the food service program? Are we going to get some federal revenue in with the meals that we are providing? So there's a lot of uncertainty, but I will say that I did perform an exercise. I call it financial risk assessment of COVID-19, and there is areas that we can save, and there are areas that we are working towards saving. So I did go through an exercise where I looked at various payroll accounts and various expense accounts, and I do think we are putting in and already have put in steps to mitigate some of the potential loss or some of the financial risk here, where we are saving. Some of it remains uncertainty. Number one, we don't know what's going to happen with the athletic season. We don't know if we're going to have a season. We don't know if this right now the MIAA has voted to, if everything were to be able to open on May 4th, to have a May 4th to June 27th season. So if that was the case, there would certainly be expenses there and so forth. So that's a little bit of an uncertainty, but we can certainly have done some analysis on that. Areas like substitute costs. Obviously, we're not really incurring substitute costs. We're not incurring your per diem daily substitutes. We're not incurring custodial overtime. We're not incurring other types of additional pay that if we were in normal operation would be occurring. So there are savings on the payroll side. On the expense side, we have taken steps to modulate and regulate our electricity and our gas boilers and lighting. We've put those on sort of holiday reduced hours, and there is going to be a level of electricity savings, a level of gas savings. I've tried to estimate that, and it's a little bit challenging, but we're certainly going to see a utility consumption savings from reduced usage from electricity, gas, and even water. So that has been put into place, and then we have notified all of our maintenance contracts that everything, all those sort of monthly visits are on hold. So there's no one coming into our school buildings to do any kind of non-essential, anything that would not be an emergency type situation, work with plumbing, with HVAC, with boiler, with electricity, with elevator, with kiln maintenance, preventative maintenance around a variety of our service contracts. Those have been put on hold, so there is savings that we're seeing. There's obviously vehicle fuel and gas savings from our building grounds and special education staff. There's vehicle repair. So a lot of those non-essential services have been put on hold, and we're experiencing savings. From the contractual standpoint, there's still some level of uncertainty around what's going to happen with school busing. There's a lot of conversations going on, I will say, by school business managers working out a very thoughtful conversation with the school finance director, with the DESC, Jay Sullivan, and with folks that have contracted with our contractor, NRT, and the other contractors across the state. So there's been statewide conference calls, and what we are looking to do is attack this kind of collaboratively, and trying to put together a joint memorandum of understanding that would go to our various providers that would recognize both our need that we want to have these drivers ready to return when we do resume to normal operation. We want to not significantly impact our long-term operation and commitment to have school bus transportation be ready to resume normal operation when it's safe to do so. Our commitment that the company does not necessarily want to lay off these drivers and risk losing them long-term. Is there already a statewide shortage of qualified school bus drivers? So we are thinking through those logically, having drivers be available and on call to deliver mails, deliver technology equipment, deliver supplies. So those are all things that we're working towards. So there certainly will be a level of savings there, but I think there's certainly recommendations that there would be some level of payment that would continue. On the special education side, the guidance has certainly been to continue to pay collaboratives and private day tuition costs. Yes, it's true that in some of these private day and collaboratives, although the students may not be in the buildings, in the schools, just like our North Reading in-house students, there's certainly remote learning and reach out in areas that are taking place, and learning that is taking place, as well as our collaboratives. Do a lot for our districts, our SEAM collaboratives in North Shore. So there's a lot of services happening, and the guidance is to continue to pay these tuition costs. Otherwise, it would, in a lot of ways, it would put these collaboratives out of business. Our tuition payments to them in a lot of ways is our Chapter 70 aid, state aid into us. So, their staff in some ways are an extension of the work that we're doing in North Reading. So that's certainly been guidance given to us. Our service providers, our OT, PT, speech, that may not be employees, but in a lot of ways they walk and talk like an employee. They regularly meet and provide direct services to our students, special education students, whether it be an occupational therapy, a speech, an orientation mobility type service. So Cynthia Kona has been instrumental in reaching out to these providers and providing guidance to them to ensure services in some way or fashion are continuing. So there's certainly guidance to work with them to allow payments to continue to be made and work to continue to happen, although obviously in a different type of format. So there's certainly savings that will be achieved in all these areas I just kind of went through, and I kind of walked through it. The athletic season, we're not going to see a full season, so there will certainly be savings on game officials, on athletic trainer costs, on transportation costs, on dues and membership supplies, custodial police details for all these events. There'll be a level of savings there. There'll be a level of savings with our Chartwell's contract with less food costs, less services, less paper and product. And just in generally our supplies, our postage, everything, copier and print management services. I've gone through all these areas and identified some savings. So I think we're putting those motions into place. The other aspect is, will there be a loss of revenue? And there's some uncertainty there as well, because as you know, the revenue that comes in from programs like athletics, full-day kindergarten, preschool, busing, extracurricular and performing arts, and food service all go to directly offset our operating budget. So we are trying to think through this logically and not rush to any decision. We're trying to collaborate and listen to guidance from the state, collaborate with our peers to find out, to respond in an appropriate manner as the situation changes almost daily. I think it's fair to say there will be a loss in revenue. I have some assumptions, and to the extent of that is going to be very difficult to predict at this point in time. The biggest hurdle in loss of revenue, obviously, is in the food service area. As we would make about $4,500 per day on daily sales, and then there was additional federal and state revenue coming in as well. I am certainly very appreciative of the work that the food service program has done, and they continue to work daily and weekly to provide meals. We reached out to families today, and we're expanding that and trying to make it clear that is available to all families and to all folks in the community that may need meals. And the Department of Education has waived the 50% criteria for only those districts that meet the 50% percentage of students on free and reduced lunch to be able to claim these meals. Now all districts can do that. So whether it be a meal that goes to a paid status student, reduced status student, free student, will be able to claim and receive a level of reimbursement, as well as if there might be another meal being provided for a family member, a sibling, or a member of the community that may not be a student. They're going to provide some level of support too. So that's certainly going to help that situation. There will certainly be a level of federal reimbursement flowing in. So there'll be a level of revenue coming in for the services that we are providing. So we're trying to increase that participation in that program, make it known that is there and available.
So, Michael, on that one, I have a couple questions on the food service specifically.
Yes.
So you're mentioning, so we can get 100% reimbursement for it. So is I mean, I know I talked to you the other day, and I had the idea about like, well, I'd love to see, you know, if people could, you know, like my kids are basically eating peanut butter and jelly every day because that's kind of
Yeah,
what we're
same
doing.
here.
Like if they could, you know, if families wanted to, you know, I was going to say even pay for them, but if we're getting paid for making them and we're incurring the hours to do it. I mean, are we encouraging people that if they want to do it? Like, 'cause I've always thought of it as like a need based, and I'm like, well, we don't need this. We can afford to make lunches for our kids, even though we may not want to do that. But I
Right.
mean, is this something that we would encourage people to do where like they could do it because it would actually almost be helping us out, or would it not be helping?
I mean, it is available. I think, you know, we are going to get, you know, a reimbursement, certainly, you know, based on the federal reimbursement, you know, percentages of each mail back. So I would say the more people that participate, we will be able to get obviously more reimbursement. So I think on the other end, obviously, the more that participate, there's obviously more of a cost of labor and product. So I think the message that we are trying to send is, look, it's available. If you're struggling in any shape and form, you know, we want to be here to help you. And this is an option that's available to really to all families at this point. From April, we're going to kick this off April 6th through May 4th. And we recommunicated that today. So right now we're only doing about 35 mails a day. I think we have the capacity to do certainly a lot more than that. So I think it's there. I think we want to promote that to the best of our ability, and we'll certainly try to accommodate. And I think the revenue, it will certainly increase our revenue on the other end as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So this would still be free to North Reading families, and
Yep.
it wouldn't. I think what you're saying is like, I mean, for the amount of labor that's going in to produce 35 meals, I would imagine the slightly more cost of materials, like the labor's. I imagine the labor's, if they can produce 35 meals, they can produce 100 and.
Yep. Yeah, we definitely have the capacity to do more.
So as Michael, just to clarify, as
Yeah.
Michael said, we now sent this out to all of North Reading, you know, all of our school system, and we also included a message about the food pantry. There's a couple of changes there.
Yeah.
One being that it's not a drop-in anymore. You have to call before Saturday, but that also is expanded a little bit beyond just those that
Yeah.
qualify for free and reduced lunch. So we kind of expanded the scope of both. We've had probably 10 come in already. I probably sent that out around noon today. We've already had 10 new ones come in. So I think there is that sweet spot. We could certainly do more. We can't accommodate 2,500 a day, but I don't think we
can do
get there.
more.
So we can definitely
Absolutely.
do more. Yeah.
And I think you'll see that increase. And you know, I think we're going to be recommending that we continue to pay the food service workers, because you know many of them are working in providing this service. And the good thing is that there's now some level of federal reimbursement that's going to flow back into the district. We've applied for grants. There are COVID-19 grants being released for support. Any grant application we see, we've submitted an application for as well. So, you know, I think it's all good. The conversations I've had with the Chartwell's management is that, you know, many districts are not assessing additional charges because of that, what the state is doing and the federal government is doing to provide that level of subsidy for all meals, whether there be a free, reduced, or paid situation.
And the lunches are just they're cold lunches, not warm lunches.
That's
right?
correct. Yep.
And for people that need it that aren't necessarily on free and reduced, it's pickup. It's not. There's no delivery for those.
So yeah, we're trying to move to a pickup situation on Monday. Certainly those families that have indicated the need for delivery, we're going to continue to do that. We're hoping to kind of ramp up the process and have kind of a curbside pickup situation going beginning on Monday as we hope the participation grows.
So, Scott, to get back to one of your original questions, do we encourage the town? Sounds like the answer is there's more capacity, but I don't think we can encourage everyone to do it just for the heck of it.
Right.
But if people are, looking for a change in a meal, just so they don't have to make peanut butter and sandwiches, is it something that people can do occasionally, or do they sign up and they're there every day? How does that work?
So right now we're polling families to let us know what how many breakfasts and lunch meals they're looking to need on a daily basis so we get a sense of that count. And then, we're making sure that we have the capacity to deliver the surveys and the mail counts that are coming in. We obviously do a little bit more than that, just in case anyone else shows up. And then we have as long as we track that and which we're doing, and the DESE is in the process of rolling out how we can now claim those and receive that level of reimbursement too. So
Right, but
they definitely have the capacity to do more. But certainly, if everyone were to enroll, and if I don't think it will happen, it would be difficult.
Yeah, and I think we could definitely support someone who on a certain day needed something, but I don't think what Rich is getting at, I don't think we could support, I'd love to do it on just Tuesdays and Thursdays, and somebody else say, no, I'd like to do Monday and Friday. Like, we can't get into that. We're going to be making those lunches every day for people, so we don't want to create a ton of waste either. And it's really, it would be a gargantuan task to kind of manage who's getting this, it's really sort of, what do you need every day, and we're going to make that same number every day.
Yeah, that's what the model we're looking to get to, because then it just operates like a very smooth operation. The folks we are rotating the personnel involved that come in, and we're operating under the precautions and the guidance of folks respecting social distancing during the meal prep process as well, and it's been a pretty smooth operation, but I think we're able to kind of ramp it up a little bit, and that's why we reached out today, and we'll see what happens with it. But I'm definitely pleased to see that what the state and through the federal USDA program and the DESE has done with releasing that 50% threshold. So it will certainly help the situation for us financially. Won't resolve it entirely, obviously, but it certainly will help. So in a kind of a bigger picture area, I don't think I'm certainly not sitting here, thinking we're in a poor situation financially or panicking by any means. I think we've been fairly conservative over a number of years now in some of these revolving accounts, where we do have a good amount of reserves available. So I think we're in a good financial situation to address this type of unforeseen situation. And I think it's fair to say that those reserves will be reduced most likely over the next several months or through this process. But I think we're in a good financial position to be able to pivot and to manage it and to keep things certainly operating without having a significant impact on what we're looking to do, what I presented earlier on fiscal 21. I think some of our reserve accounts will take a hit. Some of our ability to do certain things at the end of this year that maybe we normally have done to the level of special education prepayments and doing things with the transportation and those types of things. But I still believe that we're in solid financial standing. It's a good thing that we've been conservative with the revenue flows that have been coming in, with our budgeted offsets and with our conservative budgeting around utilities and so forth, because I think it's now put us in a much better position to address these this completely unprecedented, unforeseen situation. And although we're going to take a hit from the depletion of some of these reserve accounts, I think we are in a position to address it and see where we're at. Without a significant impact going forward. Does that make sense?
So you're saying the net, you don't think, you think there'll be a net, there's going to be some savings, some offsets. Yep. I'm guessing there'll probably be a more of a loss than a gain.
Yeah.
You don't think that's going to be I mean, when you say it's not a significant amount, it's like 100,000 or less or more.
So the number, I'm willing to share this with you. I'm looking at my Google sheet right now. I'm looking at about $120,000 right now.
Okay. A loss of about 120,000 that we'd have to try to make up
Right.
somewhere else.
Correct. And I will say that we do have, there's money in some of these accounts. So if the busing program takes a loss, we had a fairly healthy reserve that we can kind of pivot and be able to move forward without a huge impact. The full day K and pre-K, there's a little bit of a reserve there because we've been relatively conservative with our revenue projections. So I think we're able to pivot and address a loss of this nature of around 100, potential loss of this nature of around 120,000 or so.
In that 120,000, are you factoring in a loss of revenue for pre-K and K?
I'm making some assumptions. It's hard to know exactly where that's going to land, but yes, I've made some assumptions around athletics, full day kindergarten, pre-K, busing, extracurricular, food service, and rental, as well as rental revenue.
I'd love to see that if you wouldn't mind sharing it with everybody.
Yeah, I can certainly do that.
And one other question for Dr. Daly. This is more the last topic, but for structured learning, are we doing something for preschool as well? Will the preschool teachers be reaching out as well?
They will. Yep. That will most likely not involve technology to a great degree.
Okay. Other questions, and then I think we can sort of go through whatever motions you need for payment of wages. Anybody have any comments or questions? Hearing none. So, Michael, do you want to sort of go through whatever motions that you need, and we can?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Dr. Daly, I think what we're looking at the moment is to certainly recommend continuation of payment for wages for both salary and hourly employees, extending the previous motion from April 7th through May 4th.
Okay, so the first one will just be for salary and hourly employees. That for the continuation or for the future. I mean, unknown amount of time, but we're going to just continue with just the base level. We're not talking about stipends on top of anything, or like athletic, coaches or things like that. Correct.
Correct.
Okay. So can I have a motion to approve?
Sorry to interrupt you, Scott. Just about it made this come to my mind. Are there any stipended positions where there's an expectation that they're continuing on in that duty during this time?
Patrick, do you want to speak to that? 'Cause I think there's potentially some of that with the curriculum leaders.
So we're kind of in a position where we're reviewing all the stipends. The way we pay some of these stipended positions is we split the payments into two. And so we have sort of informally told the teachers and the union at this time that we're delaying payment on all of those second part of the year stipends. But some of them have already been paid just by the way, I think my understanding is we don't do all of the stipends at the same time. So some of them have been paid a second payment and some have not. And,
That's correct.
And, if armchair quarterback, if we could have held back though, but one of those payments was before this closure even happened. So, I mean, if we could have held them all back, or maybe, as Chris is suggesting, kind of weighted things and said, okay, if, this stipend is doing something, this stipend isn't, I think it's very difficult. But, our curriculum leaders and our mentors are among those that I believe are still to be paid. I would say our curriculum leaders have certainly been doing a lot to help get our teaching and learning plan off the ground. And I would like to, hopefully be able to move forward with something for them soon. But I think at this moment it's a little bit too soon. We're just waiting for a few other pieces of information. But I think it's challenging to pick and choose among who gets the stipends and who doesn't. I think the coaches for the spring are a little different because there has certainly been some work done pre-season by the coaches, but we haven't had a single day of spring sports. And so I think that's a little bit easier to wrap our heads around.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's going to be a number of stipends, like we could bring up a dozen examples, but where the teachers or whoever will understand that they can't be doing this job now. They won't be getting paid for it, but they're not doing that job because of these things. But there's also some where there might be confusion, or I wasn't sure if those conversations have been had, if these people expect that they will be doing this job and compensated later, or that they shouldn't be held responsible for doing it. There's any number of those.
Exactly. And as I've said, Michael and I have talked, and I've talked with the union. They're good with us at the moment, just holding off a little bit while we wait and see. But, those stipends don't cover the closure period. They cover the half of the year. And in some ways, a position might be front loaded where there was a lot to do at the beginning of the year. But we only paid them half, and they did more than half the work already. So, I mean, we certainly want to figure out a way to close that and bridge that gap. And I think at this moment, we just appreciate that they are allowing us to delay some of those payments, and then we will continue to revisit it to try to figure out, what we're able to support. But they understand that some of that extra money is helping to provide some of the salary for people that are not, that are paid out of revenue accounts that are not producing funds, and that they're in agreement and solidarity. The unions do, they represent specific groups, but they all stand together. And, our NREA Teachers Association spoke to me the other day that he wanted to make sure that we were taking care of everyone, the food service and everyone. And I appreciate that. And I think that's part of why they are very understanding of some of their additional stipends, because we're talking about keeping everybody whole on their regular jobs.
So my suggestion on this then would be that the motion is just on the salary and hourly employees on their general wages. That doesn't mean anything for any stipends. I think that's going to be more of a case-by-case thing that we can look at and address later on. Stipends are not paid weekly. They're not weekly amounts that are being paid to anybody. So I think we focus on that first. And overall, I guess my thought is, since paras are going to be working and food service is working, I understand some people might be working more than they were in the past. Some people might be working a little bit less. If all the food service workers can't go in, I like the idea of keeping people whole because everybody is doing what they can. And I think a lot of people are being flexible. Dr. Daly shared with me where even nurses are helping out with the town on some things, for under COVID-19. And so I think I'd be in favor of that, and we can always circle back on the stipends later on.
Yep.
And so, go Rich.
I was just going to say, it seems like the stipend thing is really end of this whole process discussion to have, because we don't know if we're back in on May 4th. Then a lot of those we can't decide now that we're not going to pay stipends when they may be back in effect on May 4th. So it's premature to call them stipends.
If I could,
can I have a motion? Go ahead.
Just two things. One, just to clarify that point about the nurses too. It's a very complex situation, and my understanding is the nurses are not working for the town in any way, shape, or form because they work for us. So the nurses are a part of the Teachers Association, and so I asked them if they were willing for me to share their information with the town, whether the town is asking them to volunteer, whether the town is asking to pay. That's a separate relationship, and we are not asking the nurses to work for the town as a part of their responsibilities for the schools. They are still employed by the schools, and they still have duties and responsibilities to our staff and to our students. So I just want to make sure that's clear. It's a bit of a tricky situation that I'm trying to work out. I got an email call from Bob Collins from the town while we're in our meeting. So it's an ongoing discussion. So I just want to clarify that. The second thing is, before we vote, Michael, is it worth talking about at all any of these? Are there any contractual elements that we want to maybe have here? I'm thinking of wellness incentives and things like that. Is there anything that we want to consider that maybe we need to revisit before we kind of do a blanket vote? Or I just think the concept of a wellness incentive when someone's at home might be curious. I'm not sure if that's something we want to think about.
Yes, Patrick. So there are other things that we're going to have to certainly address in the future. Some of them could have a contractual situation, but there are certainly wellness incentives and vacation buyouts and additional floater stipends to travel among schools for food service and custodians that get paid periodically throughout the year. We've sort of put those on hold. I think we have time to maybe react, since some of these wouldn't get paid until June. But it just brings up those questions. Given the nature of our work and we're at home and we're not, it's obviously difficult to track time off or sick personal days, those types of things. Does it really make sense for us to be paying out some of these incentive pays at the end of the year? Some of my assumptions, I did build in some savings assumptions that we wouldn't be doing all of those, but it certainly brings up that question.
Yeah, my suggestion is that we try to sit down with the union representatives of some of those units the way I've had an ongoing conversation with the teachers. I think we might be need to do that with some of these other units as well.
So it sounds like the motion should be something pretty basic along the lines of that we vote to approve the continuation of payment of base salaries through May 4th.
You want to make that as a motion, Rich?
Does that meet the requirements?
Michael, what about, should contractual services be a separate motion?
So I think the second motion after our own employees might be to address some of the other comments in the commissioner's memo there, to continue with contractual service providers and bus companies and so forth.
Yeah, I think we should do that. I think we should do that separate. So, Rich, if you want to make the motion on the first one.
So I move that the committee vote to approve the continuing payment of employee base salaries through May 4th.
I second.
Okay. And any further discussion? And that this would include both salary and hourly employees. So we have to do a roll call for this. Rich?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, so passes 5-0. Thank you, guys. So, Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about the contracted service providers? I mean, I saw the letter, and
So the
we don't have
service
much
providers.
choice.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Seems like we don't have much choice in this, anyways, from the direction of.
No, so I'm looking at item 3 in the direction, and I think it does make sense to continue to provide payments to our special education related service providers. This is the speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and that are providing services to our in-district students. And I just want to say that I know Cynthia Conant's certainly been in communication. We don't have many of them. We have about 5 of them. Talk about 5 independent contractors here providing these services through varying degrees. And there's certainly a lot of this work's going to continue. So I think it does make sense based on the guidance to continue to pay these contractors.
And just to clarify, when you say you think these are going to continue, all 5 of those people are continuing doing something in some form, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And they're billing their hours, right? So
yes. So
whatever hours they're putting in, whether it's preparing to be able to do something from a distance standpoint or actually delivering services, they're billing us.
Right. We get a weekly bill. Correct.
Okay, so Rich, would you mind doing the motion for this one as well, then?
So shall we group all contracted services together, or do we need to separate? I mean,
I would separate out the bus just to be safe, because I want to talk a little bit about the bus as well. So I would just do the contracted service providers and not the bus company.
Would we need to put as they're billed, or just as, I believe Mike said that they still send in their hours type thing, so it's not carte blanche, right? It's what their hours are that they're saying they want paid for.
Michael, you can obviously speak to it, but it seems like based on the guidance, there's a number of different categories, right? So tuition payments for collaboratives, et cetera, those are going to continue. We want those to continue, and those aren't billed. But there are service providers also that are billing. So maybe we can reference the guidance itself.
That's correct. So that's guidance 2 and 3 in the commissioner's memorandum.
Yep, that's a good idea, Rich. Why don't you do that when you make your motion?
Okay. So do we need to approve number 1, the first item, the tuition for collaboratives, or?
Yeah, I think so. Yes. Yeah.
So it sounds like basically 1, 2, and 3 then is for this vote. So I'll move that the committee vote to approve ongoing payments for contracted services as identified in the guidance from the commissioner dated March 27th, specifically items 1, 2, and 3 in that guidance, referring to collaboratives, et cetera, tuition payments, and contracted special education service providers.
I second.
Well said.
Good job. Okay, any more discussion on this? So for roll call, Rich,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Janine,
Aye.
Diana,
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0, unanimous. Thank you. And then finally on the bus company, Michael, if you can talk a little bit about the bus company in particular. I know we have to pay wages and things of those sort, but is there any clarity on if we can reduce the amount since there's no actual third-party expenses such as gas being incurred?
Right. So we are working, and I'm actually will be on a conference call tomorrow with about 15 other area school finance directors that have North Reading Transportation as their contractor, and we are attempting to kind of put together a memorandum of understanding that essentially clarifies what our expectation is for the company. Number one, a certification or confirmation that the drivers would remain employed and remain paid and active employees, and would be ready to resume, duty when called upon to do so. And then the second piece of that is just that negotiation between, we certainly want to pay the prevailing wage rates of the drivers and look at that, but there's certainly going to be perhaps we don't pay 100% because there's a level of savings on the fuel side. And it's a little bit tricky because, these companies bid and base their pricing on all services, meaning extracurricular and athletics. So when that breaks down, I think it does have an impact on these companies, on the revenue streams for them as well. So I think we're on the same page. We're in a good place that we can. I'm hopeful that we can come to an agreement that payments would continue, the drivers would remain employed, they would be ready to return to work, and we may not pay 100% of the price. There would be some break for the fuel piece of it.
So maybe a suggestion here would be to have a motion that refers to both the guidelines as well as, to say that we would pay the amounts due under the guidelines as further clarified by, the assistant superintendent in his discussions with the company or something along those lines.
I think that would work.
If I could add also, though, I would like to see what this reimbursement coming from the federal government looks like. The only information I've heard is that it's going to follow the Title I formula, which, again, does not bode well for North Reading. We don't get a lot of money through that formula because of our poverty, but that the number of students we bus has nothing to do with our poverty level. And so, I think the expectation for our district to do what another district's doing in terms of keeping the bus drivers whole might be disproportionate to what we receive. So I don't know whether, Michael, I don't know your thoughts on whether do we wait a little bit to see what that number is going to look like.
Yeah, I think we can. I think we can wait.
Postpone a vote here. Not to a vote, yeah.
A little bit. I mean, I think the guidance is still references bus transportation companies and to pay, and it's really there's two levels of services here. There's the special education end and there's the regular end. The guidance reflects paying both. I know, so our special education end is really through the SEAM Collaborative contract. So I know SEAM Collaborative is working with trying to get something to the member districts that makes sense in a similar fashion. And there's conference calls going on there as well as the regular kind of big yellow bus piece of it as well. So I do think we're all based on the guidance and based on what is the right thing to do, both for us and the company, would be that we need to submit some, a form of payment, and then I think the amount that's up in the air to me is what does that look like? Is it 80, 85, 90%, or what percentage?
Right.
So would you like the motion that we talked about, where we are authorizing payment subject to your further discussion with the company, or would you rather wait until a future meeting to have that?
I mean, I think we can go ahead and make that motion, and and I can certainly, unless you want to authorize, myself to enter into conversations and negotiations with the driver with the bus company to negotiate a terms of payment during the closure that would be brought back for final approval at a later date.
Scott, if I could just comment, my own sense is, just for the sense of, let's not say we're going to do something before we know what it is. We should just, if it doesn't put Michael in a bind, I would wait. And
yeah,
say,
I think it's okay to do that.
What is the what is the understanding with the bus company? The reimbursement is going to be the reimbursement. Obviously, it'd be helpful to know that as well. But what is the what are they willing to agree to? What is the bus company willing to agree to? And Janine just brought up a question that I had in my mind too. Have we paid them for March already, I assume? And
yeah, so we have paid for March. We have not paid for April. So they kind of bill at the beginning of the month,
right?
Most likely. So they are paid through March 31st right now. So yeah, I think we can definitely have some time, and they understand that they may not eventually be paid, and maybe even until June potentially. But yeah, I think we can wait to see how my conversations later this week play out with both this North Shore group that's taking the lead and the bus company.
That's fine with me if we want to wait. I just want to make sure that if you need the authorization, that you have it, because I know you guys are doing a lot on the side about educating our kids, and to the extent that you need our authority to make payments, I want to make sure you're fully supported in that. So if you think it's fine to wait till the next meeting, happy to do that. I think even at the budget hearing, we should always obviously have COVID updates on there so that we can always give you whatever motions that you need. Okay, so are we set with payment of wages? Michael, Patrick?
I think so, yeah.
I believe so.
Okay, so then we can go skip back ahead to item 5 on the budget workshop.
Great.
Agenda, which was looking at elementary class sizes and enrollment breakdown. Michael looked like he froze here. See if he comes back in a second. Patrick, you want to walk us through for a minute?
Michael, are you trying to present?
I think he froze. in front of me. I printed out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to just try to bring up the document here. Does anyone have any questions about the projections of the enrollment?
I don't think so. I think we can move on. I mean, I think we kind of know where it's coming from. I don't think anything's vastly different than
There's not
the year before.
not than what we've looked at in the past. Recently.
Yeah, I think the bigger question, Patrick, is just going to be on when we get to closing the gap, like where that comes from.
Yeah.
So why don't we move on to 6, which is budget gap closing ideas.
Sounds good to me.
Michael's joining again.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Michael.
Sorry about that. It happened to me the other day too. Suddenly my internet cut out. I lost internet for like a couple minutes there.
Well, I don't think there's no questions on the elementary. I think we all had looked at the elementary class sizes, enrollment breakdowns. I think we were just going to move right on, unless you have any specific comments on that.
No, I don't. Yeah, I was just going to walk through it and see if there was any questions. So
I think we were good there. We can go on to the budget gap closing ideas.
okay, great. So I'm attempting to share my screen again.
It's working, Michael. I can see it.
All right, great. So I'm going to go to that page now. Okay, so in light of some of my comments earlier with the finance planning team and where we're kind of at in those conversations and with everything, the uncertainty that's going on, I would sort of echo Mr. Buckley's comments with the revenue plan before we kind of went back in the agenda that, I'm certainly less hopeful sitting here today than we have been in previous years with the revenue plan. Hopeful that there might be some, number one, either additional revenue that could be added somewhere along the line with new growth or investment income or any areas that we've seen that change as we get closer to town meeting or closer to the budget vote, and as well as on the fixed cost side. So, I'm somewhat thinking, what we're seeing today, could be what it is, and with the guidance or the concern about new positions and adding that in this area of uncertainty, Dr. Daly and I decided that for consideration for this meeting, we would at least workshop to the level services budget gap, which is the $324,654, which is obviously not what we wanted, but I think we're in a little bit of a different place than we were a few weeks ago when the budget was presented. So, if we were to kind of reserve ourselves to try to mitigate any major loss here or reductions and try to get towards somewhat of a level services budget to balance, and unfortunately maybe deferring some of those initiatives, this plan would get us there, and I'll walk through it. And this plan also gets us to a point where there would be no new FTEs essentially added to the budget. So, no new benefit costs, no new additional impact to the fixed cost health insurance area of the revenue plan. So $324,654 is the gap for level services. So we actually have three this first position is a position that is vacant at the moment. If you've been following my budget updates, I've been saying, technology and central office, business office, we have a balance there because we had personnel that left at the end of last fiscal year that we never did fill. We did post them and tried to fill. We didn't find the right fit. So we kind of pivoted and spread it out workload and did different things. And some of it certainly has been working. So this was our plan to sort of consolidate two positions into one in the central office data world. And us, given the environment, we could kind of put that on hold and save about $65,000 in the FY21 budget. So that would be one option. we have two other academic positions, one at the district level, one at the middle school level, who are, no one would be losing a job in this scenario. They would be the person is retiring at the end of the school year. So if we were to hold off on filling those positions, it could certainly impact at the secondary level some class sizes in some offerings. But I think we would be able to kind of address it to a degree. It would be two other positions we could certainly hold off on. The fourth item is deferring our plan to add the $60,000 into the technology budget, or not doing that to that extent. If we were to do that, it would save potentially up to about $60,000, or this is kind of a balancer there to get us to the number. So that would be reducing that, looking to, and I mentioned earlier that if that's not the worst thing for us operationally and educationally, because we do have, at least for next year, the earmark state grant to fall back on. So we could hold off and defer that. I think that would have put us in really good position to be able to get the devices we need or replace and get. But I think we still will be able to continue the one-to-one program, certainly through the state grant. So it's not the worst thing for us. And then the last item here would be going back to the elementary class sizes. If we were to maybe take a little more risk and hold off on doing one of those positions, I can show you what one we had in mind. We feel like we could balance this budget. So it would be essentially 4 positions kind of coming off, 3 positions currently. We would still move forward with the additional kindergarten position, or there's actually a level of kindergarten savings and a level of additional positions at the elementary level, but we'd only be going up by a 0.5 overall, and then we would still go forward with was our very high priority, which was the middle school academic teachers at the middle school level for the foreign language and the STEM. So that wouldn't be impacted. So we would go forward with those two, go forward with the elementary, and backing off on these other positions for the time being would get us to a kind of an FTE neutral situation and allow us to balance the budget. Is there any questions on that? I'm sure there is.
One quick clarification, then I'm going to go to everybody else. I want to talk about a couple of these, but the eliminate 1 FTE at grade elementary, the new teacher position, that was.
Yeah. So if I got me walk back what we kind of had in mind.
I want to be careful. I want to make sure that this is not somebody that has a position right now we're talking about.
Correct. This is a position that we felt we needed to address due to potential enrollment. It was always sort of, uncertain or unknown. This is quite honestly, this is the position we're looking at. It's the one I'm highlighting here. So we had moved that up. We had one draft of the budget, we had that at 4 because we were thinking that might be around 83 or 84 students. I think Mr. Killeen, said, there's a chance he's hearing things of potential move-ins or folks moving into his district. He's seen an uptick in that. So he wanted us to maybe go with a higher number there and start out with the additional section. So if we did not do that, there is an element of risk to that. But if we did not do that and enrollment did come in around 83 or 84 students, I think we could manage that with the 4 sections. Class sizes would be impacted to a degree. But that is one area that we've looked at.
But if it was at 88, it would be at 22.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. But I think there's a chance it would be less. I think there's a chance it would be 85 or 86. So you could be looking at 20 or 21. At most, it would be 22.
Okay, thank you. So I won't jump in and monopolize the time. I'll kind of go around and see. Rich, you usually have a comment. Do you have any thoughts or comments first?
No, I mean, I don't. I mean, other than I think off the top of my head, it seems the plan overall seems fine. I'm obviously, I'm sure we're all uncomfortable with that that elementary school teacher, but we'll see if anybody else, what other people have to say about it.
Okay. Chris, do you have any comments or questions?
Sure. Yeah, I have one in this bridging the gap document. If we were to go this route, would we still be looking to hire the teaching and learning coordinator for elementary?
No. No,
It's a
those
good question.
everything
So-
in table 2 would be off the table, right, Michael?
Right, yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, all of table 2 would be off the table. And we're looking at trying to achieve table 1, backing off a little bit on the elementary additions, taking a little bit of risk there with this potential grade 1 section. And but still achieving the middle school positions by deferring and not hiring those positions, that one that is vacant currently and those others that are due to retire or due to retirements.
Sure. And then lastly, just for the retiring secondary school teachers, you had said that might impact course offerings or obviously course sizes, but you felt like the school could be able to handle that reasonably well. Do we have an idea of if that would actually cause a cancellation of any classes or anything like that in terms of electives or?
So what would happen? Both are painful, and just as much as the 22 in the class, losing the digital learning specialist, there is a teaching component there that would have to shift somewhere else. There is also, we just a reminder, we do not have technicians in our district, and so we have a 1-to-1 program. All students 7 to 12 have a 1-to-1 device, plus all the other technological needs in the district. That's what this person does. So we would not be replacing that person as a whole. So it's not something we're very comfortable with, certainly not for the long term. But if we are looking to balance the budget, given this overall crisis that we're in, we would prefer not taking away from the progress of what we've built with the 6th and the 7th grade foreign language and computer science. Because in that situation, if we filled these 2 positions and not those, we would either have 7th graders with a missing half of a year, or we would have to remove our 6th grade program, move those teachers to 7th to complete it for them, and now we're 2 years behind again. So we want to keep building that momentum. What it would certainly mean for middle school is, there's a lot of complications we'd have to discuss there, but it certainly would impact some class sizes there for general arts. And we're not 100% convinced that it's going to work, but these are the ideas that we're discussing.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, and Janine and Diana both said they had no comments or questions at this time. So my comments and questions. So first, it stinks when you have a budget that you want to meet and you can't. I agree with, I think, previous administration and this administration wants to prioritize keeping the teachers that are here and not cutting back on staff. And so I think that's the right place to look. I appreciate not looking at cutting a lot of other budgets because, I get nervous when we cut a lot of revolving accounts or any sort of rainy day funds, because then if you get into a situation like membranes break, you don't have the money, you have to take from something else. So, I appreciate where you're coming from. I agree that nothing on table 2 trumps anything else that's in there. I agree with you that putting the teachers at the middle school to continue that position are required. I don't know. I guess my question is on on what we're cutting. If we could find more money, what would we be trying to recover first? Because I know in previous school committees have really pushed to get more academic teachers at the middle and high school because we had really high class sizes in the past. I think enrollment has gone down a little bit, which gives a little bit more breathing room. So I feel a little bit more comfortable there. But if we were to be able to find a little bit more money, where would we be looking first? Would it be the elementary teacher? Would it be the technology? I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about the technology as well, where like I wonder if even a CIPC would consider taking that on if we had to cut it from it, because the last few years were funded that way.
Yeah, I'm not sure I follow what this has to do with CIPC, but
well, the technology in previous years we've received money from CIPC for buying one-to-one devices. This is the first year that we would be moving that money into our operating budget, and so what I wonder is if we had to cut it because of the economic times here, if there'd be any consideration to helping us, because I mean, is this basically saying we're going to be reusing 5-year-old devices, giving them to the incoming class? Is that what this is talking about?
No, we're not proposing cutting the purchasing of devices in this plan. We're talking about people.
I think Scott, you're referring to the fourth one down there, the technology. So the CI, I think I'm following what you're saying with the CIPC connection. So for us, putting that on there, I think the majority of that $53,800 would have to come from that added line item of $60,000 that we added to the budget. Because I think, like what you said earlier, we could try to look at all of the expense lines, discretionary expense lines, and try to cut a little bit here and there. But I hesitate in doing that just because of what you just said. We've worked hard on getting those to a level. The schools, need them for their spending. On the maintenance side, we've dealt with more extraordinary than unforeseen. So we didn't want to kind of go there. So this was a new line, so it was easier to look at this in terms of. And then I think it's easier for us to put this on this reduction list this year because we have access to the earmark grant.
Right.
So next year we would be, fast forward a year from now or next fall, we would be either, back to trying to get this line item put in the operating budget for fiscal 22, or going back to what we've been doing and trying to add it as additional money through the CIPC. I think Patrick and I both think that's not the long-term solution for this, given it's so embedded. So I think we're kind of deferring our effort to get that in the operating budget a year, given the fact that we have the state budget money.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I'm sorry, Scott. I totally misunderstood. I thought we were still talking about the position, so I'm sorry. If I could just address that question.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, I just want to say, we have not discussed this at the administrative council level, but from the conversations I've had with the principals directly impacted, I haven't really talked to the elementary principals about that position, but I would think that it's not as simple as just class sizes. It's all about the student schedule. And so that the middle school, that general arts teacher offers an additional option for students so that they're not repeating things. So it's got a lot of different facets that we'd have to work out. But in my mind, that might be the first one I would bring back. The digital learning we would have to talk about because of its greater impact on the technology support, and then the elementary classroom. But again, I haven't workshopped that with my teachers yet. But that's my thought right now, because those other two positions are positions we have currently that we wouldn't be filling, and I would prioritize those over an additional elementary if we can keep those numbers somewhere in the 2021. Obviously, if it's at the 88, that might be another conversation. But.
Great. Yeah, Patrick, I would agree.
When will we have more data on the numbers, by the way? I mean, with Mr. Colleen, with there specific families he was worried about or thinking that might be moving in, will we have information on that in the next month, or is this something that we could, over the summer, suddenly we find there's 90 students in that section?
Yeah, it's pretty fluid. I think right now, looking at his current kindergarten enrollment, plus the little school, which currently has a few batch kindergartners that are going to be going back to the batch for grade 1. So I think looking at that would put him, around the 83, 84 number. And then I think historically he's seen an uptick of between 4 and 5% or so of that enrollment. That's kind of where we landed with the 88. It's some years I've seen that happen, and some years it kind of stays with what the kindergarten numbers are, and it's closer to the 83, 84. And some years you might see, 4 or 5 students come in, and it might be to the 88. It's varied. It's almost like in every other year where I've seen it be a 5% increase and then a level or a 1% increase. But he's historically just looking at, I think what he's seen between what the grade 1 numbers are. I'm sorry, the kindergarten numbers are.
The bottom line is we're cutting 4 positions in order to get 2.5 back. So we're losing 1.5 FT in this. We're not adding anything. We're losing 1.5, plus we're losing, the technology budget, and that's sort of where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not where we want to be in an ideal situation. I think it will certainly be down these 3 FTEs, which are kind of there in our budget currently, that these first 3 positions, and then we would be up the 2.5 when you net the additional elementary grade level position, and you're actually down a 0.5 kindergarten. So it nets a 0.5 from an FTE standpoint.
Yeah, and so to me, it's clear. I mean, just to say, and this is, I agree with where you're looking, but just to be clear, this is not level services. This is not level services. This is cuts to the budget. This is not just not hiring additional people. This is cutting positions from the schools.
Correct.
Yeah, that's correct. That's fair.
Which, again, I think we have to say to very clearly in finance planning, like, there is no way under the current budget that there will be level services. This will be fewer teachers in the classroom. This would be larger class sizes if we go forward with this budget.
Correct. Yeah, that's fair. That would all be the case.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from anybody? Okay. I think we were going to move forward with the budget process, the budget hearing still.
Yes. So I'm just going to bounce back to this page here. So this is kind of the remaining key dates. Here we are on April 1st doing the workshop. The administrative team, I think, certainly has to come together between now and the public hearing. As Patrick said, we just, given the environment we've been in, we would have kind of debated this list a little bit more. So we'll certainly probably have to come together, virtually over the next week and a half or so. And then, but we are moving forward with the public hearing on April 13th, where I'll certainly plan to do a 20 or so minute overview presentation, and barring any other changes, I think there's definitely at least one other finance planning team meeting before then. We would present a list, perhaps similar to what you've seen this evening, and then after that we have opportunity for another workshop, and then we're not due to vote the budget until early May, and then you have the town meeting. Town meeting is actually June 8th. Actually, that's actually a change. I didn't change this document. So, any questions on the timeline?
My only other question on the budget. Sorry, one more, and I don't want to go down this alley very far, but I think from judging from what Dr. Daly said, I hear that we're trying to prioritize keeping teachers, that are here already, because what we're cutting are the positions that are coming up due to retirement. But it sounds like if we were to cut positions based on the need of the position, some of these positions would not be the ones that are being cut. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's fair to say that we definitely are looking here first because of the retirements, if that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just hate taking steps back in areas when, I don't know, I mean, I want to keep all the teachers, and so I'm not arguing that we don't do it this way, but it just seems like, again, when we look at what we're trying to accomplish as, and all the forward thinking and 5-year plans, when, we're dictating what is offered by when somebody's retiring, and this is where I just hate having to say we're going to take a step back in an area which, is not where we want to do it. I understand the people aspect of it, and I appreciate that, and I'm not saying I disagree with it.
So I would say, I would just say historically, Scott, if there's no fat, so there's really no positions we can cut, at all. There's not like we have, electives with nobody in them or anything. So I think if we do have to cut, it has historically been a position without teaching responsibilities, so that's where the DLS position would be. My time that I've been here, those have been the teacher positions that have come up first because they don't have direct instruction responsibilities with students. So if we had to think about this might be a place we'd be going. One of the things I will say is difficult. I say I haven't discussed with the AC. We have not had a typical AC meeting that has not been related to closure in so long.
Right.
To talk about things like this, but I would say, just based on the historical knowledge, that if we had to put all teaching positions on the chopping block, I think one that is teacher support as opposed to student support would probably come up kind of early in the discussion. So I feel like it's not only the retirement that's driving this, but that's certainly made it a clear choice. And I think the people involved, both Dr. Downs and Dr. O'Connell especially, both believe, as much as they know and value these positions, they also really believe in what we're trying to do and build at the middle school position with the full-time classes that benefits all students directly. So I think we would probably arrive at something similar if it were not for the retirements. But this certainly is much less painful because nobody who intends to work next year would be losing a position.
Thank you. Okay. So I think that's all we have on the agenda. Oh, do we have anything else? Sorry, go to the other agenda. We have no minutes. We have no staffing or bids and donations, correct?
Correct.
Subcommittee updates. I guess the only subcommittee update would be the finance planning team, which we had the other day, and I think we sort of summarized in the budget updates. Were there any other subcommittees to update on?
I'm not
Hearing
sure.
none.
Michael,
Go ahead.
did CIPC meet, Michael, in between? I'm not sure if that.
No, capital.
Diana.
We still haven't met since the last time we ranked. We began to rank the proposals, and I believe there still needs to be another meeting to really figure out where that line is going to get drawn. But we did have a meeting where we began to rank the items, and we need another meeting to kind of follow up on that. No decisions have really been made financially.
And the upcoming subcommittee meeting, it looks like only April 9th is coming up, which is finance planning team. No administrative report or correspondence, correct, Dr. Daly?
Correct. I would just like to say again that, working with the town, working with all members of our community has been great in this difficult time. The town is moving to have continue some regular meetings with department leaders, and I plan to routinely attend those and participate, but I'm talking with the town administrator and other chiefs and town officers on almost a daily basis as new things come up, and they've been there for me. I think I've been there for them to support with communication, and it's been very important. Something that will be coming out that very soon is just a reminder to our community to keep that social distancing, and to really, when you're going to an open space, unfortunately, you can't be playing contact pickup basketball right now, or even though you're outside and it's fresh air, it's we still have to maintain social distancing and congregating in parking lots and cars and talking, and those are the things that folks are desperately looking for some social interaction, but we still have to be extremely cautious. So I'm going to be forwarding some of those messages that I know Michael Gilberto is going to share with me, and it's going to come from a couple of different directions. So just wanted to pass that along as well.
Thank you. And if you all didn't think I was a big enough dork yet, I was listening to the Board of Health meeting the other day, because what else are we doing nowadays? So I was listening to virtual meetings, and just wanted to say they went out of their way to say how great it's been working with the schools, Dr. Daly in particular, in this crisis. And so I know that the town appreciates what you guys have been doing as well. Okay, so for future business, we have a meeting on April 13th, the school committee budget public hearing, which will be virtual as well. And then we have a workshop scheduled at April 29th. I guess we'll probably keep it just in case anything changes the finance planning team, but potentially that could be modified or eliminated, I think. But why don't we just keep that for now as well?
And I'm keeping those. I'm scheduling those right now as virtual meetings moving forward, at least through May 4th.
Okay, correct. Any other questions, comments, topics?
Just on the budget hearing, I just want to make it clear to everyone that Michael did a great job of gathering information about the language to use. So we did post that publicly, and we've added to our website. We have our school committee meetings we're listing there, COVID-19 updates, and also we've got a disclaimer about these virtual meetings, including the public hearing that Michael helped to get on our website. That's very front-facing, so everyone's very clear about the participation and how they can participate in those hearings. So we've met all of our deadlines despite all the craziness. We've got everything posted well in advance, and it's out there. So I wanted to thank Michael and Ann Lundell for helping me with that.
Yes, thank you guys, and I'm being a nuisance to try to make sure we don't forget things too.
Wow, that's very helpful as well, Scott.
Okay, so can I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
Okay, roll call. Rich?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. So passes 5-0. Motion, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Great.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Wonderful job.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.